I think people feel that because they have a voice, that it has to be used. Is what you're saying going to add value, or have you really taken the time to listen? I find that a lot of people are so caught up with the difficulties and why it can't be done, but not so focused on why it can, how it can. I find it very difficult to sit down and do nothing. I don't really feel like I can ever stop. For me, for some reason, it feels like relaxing is a bit of a waste of time. My fundamental belief is I'm here for a limited period of time and I want to get the best possible outcome of the time that I have. I don't think you can make a CEO. I think somewhere along the line, somewhere within them, they have the innate ability. Every person has their own intrinsic toolkits that they need to be successful at something. The trick is to try and identify what those things are.
Welcome to the iGaming Leader podcast, where we uncover the human side of some of the most inspirational leaders in our industry. I'm your host, Leo Judkins, and as an ex-iGaming director turned performance coach, I've worked with over 200 leaders from companies like Entain, 365, Flutter, and many more to help them build the habits to achieve sustainable high performance. In these episodes, we share exactly what it takes for you to achieve the same. So with that being said, let's dive in. Hey everybody, welcome to the iGaming Leader podcast. I am super excited for today's guest. I'm here with Justin, who's gone from call centers to catwalks to C-suites, and somewhere along the way, he's decided to say the quiet parts out loud, talk about the stuff that others really don't talk about. And we were talking a little bit beforehand, Justin. I'm so impressed by everything that you've done. Like, you're the type of guy that somebody tells them how to do things and you do it the opposite way. And I'd love to explore that a little bit more today on the podcast. So welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me, Leo. I'm very happy to be here, and I look forward to adding some interesting conversation to the mix.
Let's start with that, if that's okay. What's the earliest moment that you can remember where you thought, the rules weren't written for you, where you decided, I'm going to break away here and do things differently than everybody else?
I remember being at school. I think it was very young. I mean, I must have been, we're talking early primary school, possibly. Where there was a lot of disorder, I would say, at school, and you'd find me having everyone sit in particular areas, making sure that everyone knew what it was that was going on, and making sure that I created a bit of structure. So I listened to the teachers, and but I definitely had my own way of doing this. I kind of just feel like I really hate to be the one quoting Lady Gaga, but I was obviously born that way.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. And did you have moments where you thought, okay, I've got to kind of comply, I've got to follow what everybody else is doing, or have you been more of a person that felt comfortable just doing things your own way? How did that evolve?
I think it's an interesting question. For me, I think I've always struggled with the concept of having to do something. I think that sentence never really computed very well with me. Not because I don't like structure. Today, I think I've learned to appreciate it. I think what I struggle with is the doing something because it's always been done that way, or doing something because I haven't taken the time to think of how to do it a better way. I think it's those approaches that I struggle with. So for me, why is very, very important. I've asked why a lot of times. But for me, I think being able to ask that and feel comfortable asking that without feeling the burden of feeling silly or feeling like you shouldn't ask that question, I think has helped quite a lot, to be fair. So I've always felt comfortable challenging the norm, but not challenging it for the sake of challenging it. I think that's where a lot of people make the mistake.
Yeah, how so? Tell me a little bit more about that. Where do you feel people go wrong with that?
I think people feel that because they have a voice that it has to be used, and I think that is a tough one. It's important to speak when you have something to say, something that can add value to the conversation, because everyone has an opinion. Of course, that's who we are as human beings. We all have an opinion on things. But I think, is what you're saying going to add value, or that you want to say? Have you really taken the time to listen to what's being said? I find that that's a big plus. For me, back in the day, there was a lot of very, very early teenage years. There was a lot of what I felt, what I thought, and it's good to express yourself, but sometimes it's also good to learn. So very early on, I took it upon myself to really focus on the people who have already been there, done that. So a lot of my friends, a lot of the people I surrounded myself at work, even to this very day, are people who have had a lot more life experience and experience in general, certain aspects of work, profession, personally, that I can take and learn from in terms of their knowledge.
I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? There's a difference between feeling comfortable speaking out, saying things and asking why. And there's what you said earlier, there's people that just want to challenge everything for the sake of challenging it. Was it for you, was it more about understanding why things were the way they are? Or was it more about, can I find a different way? I'm asking because I'm trying to uncover the early entrepreneurial mindset, I suppose.
I think for me, I always like to understand why something works the way it works, what has led it to get to that particular stage. But someone said something to me a couple of months ago, I think, and he said to me, he loves the fact that I am unburdened by the problem, and he doesn't understand how and why I can think of the solution so quickly on my feet. And that's not to float my own boat, but I suppose I never really took the time to even reflect on how I've gotten to where I've got to, why I think the way I think, until that moment. And I realized that really I've never really been burdened by the problem. I'm not also burdened by the realities of things, but more that I'm really looking beyond all the no's and all the reasons why it can't be done. So I find that a lot of people are so caught up with the difficulties and why it can't be done, but not so focused on why it can, how it can.
Yes.
And I think that is where a lot of people struggle. So it doesn't even cross my mind what the issue is, or what is the blocker. I'm just thinking, how am I going to get it done?
Yeah, I love that. And I see that in everything that you do, Justin. From you thrive in the challenge, right? It's for you, the obstacle is the way, I think. And it's something that you've talked about a lot, where you feel that patience has been one of your biggest challenges, right? One of your biggest learning, like one of the biggest skills that you want to develop, but also one of the biggest things that you've found challenging. So yeah, I can see how that's true for you, and how problems are actually, the area that you thrive in. What happens then when you find yourself in a stable situation where life is good, business is good, there's no challenge? I know it's like la la land and it doesn't happen, but what happens to you in those situations where it's the opposite of where you thrive?
So for me, it's more a case of I'm constantly working on something else. There is nothing I don't want to do or I'm interested in. I'm very proactive in that sense. So even though I'm very busy at VentureMax, I obviously have my own companies, my own projects, my own interests, and I make sure I'm always active. My challenge more than anything is probably to relax. I find it very difficult to sit down and do nothing. So even if I am lying down on the sofa, I am thinking about something, I'm working something out in my head, I am calculating something on my phone. I don't really feel like I can ever stop. For me, for some reason, it feels like everything's relaxing is a bit of a waste of time. And I think it comes down to the fact that my fundamental belief is I'm here for a limited period of time, and I want to get the best possible outcome of the time that I have. And that time to me is almost like a currency, like if I put my time into something, I am investing it, so me having this conversation with you is an investment. They are minutes I will never get back. Am I going to see it as an investment? Is it going to be an investment, or am I on the losing end of that? And I don't like to lose my time because I can't get it back. And that's what also makes me impatient. It's also what makes me so focused on, for the most part, bar the 3 minutes it took me to call into this call. Keeps coming on time because I don't like to take away from other people's time either.
So true, right? Time, I always say time isn't money, because money you can make more of, you can reinvest, and time you can never get back, right? So it's a one-time expenditure. So I completely agree with you in that. There's different mindsets though, right? There's people that kind of look at rest and recovery as a way to be able to achieve more in their active periods, if you will. Think about it like sprinting and resting and not being able to sprint all the time. And there's people that feel that they've constantly got to be on. Like you sound like, or it's not have to be on, but are constantly on, and maybe struggle a little bit more with rest and a relaxation. But is it something that you think you want to do, you should do, you have to do, the rest and relaxation? You were talking about having been to Gozo for a fair bit of, the last period. Yeah, do you think it's something that you want to develop?
I think that today, I think it's become more and more problematic as time has gone, is we almost feel like there is a cure or a fix or a label or a box for everyone. And I don't think anyone should be anything. And I think if you function well, and you thrive, in that situation, that's what makes you happy. And I think happiness ultimately is what keeps you going, and what life is all about. So I think if you're happy, your body adjusts. Some people say, oh, you need to have 8 hours sleep, 7 hours sleep. I function just fine with 6.5 hours sleep. Now, do I know if I'm going to live to 300 or if I'm going to live to 60? I have no idea. But I'm very happy with the journey as it's going, and I'm happy within myself. It comes with stress, and there are times when I think to myself, my God, how much better would it be if I just went back to retail and just did something I really enjoyed, got paid terribly, but I enjoyed it for what it was, and life was simple and good. So there are pros and cons to everything, but for me, I think no one should be anything. The only thing you should be is happy.
You've had such a diverse background. You've been in retail, right? Harrods, you've been in call centers, Popeye Village, changing batteries. You've been in politics. They are such different worlds as well. What's the constant that you've noticed through those different types of environments? What are some of the things that maybe about yourself that is constant within those environments, or perhaps about how people work, or how to deal with people? What are some of the things that you've noticed that are the same across those massively different areas?
You're right. I think in the beginning, I was definitely looking to find myself. So I think we all do that, even though maybe on some people's CVs it doesn't necessarily show that they did. But I think ultimately we all do. I think what the common thread there is that work is work, and you can enjoy work, or work can just be work. For me, I find enjoyment in work. Everything I've done has always revolved around people, around relationships, around adaptability. I think these are all key, and I think people is probably even the common thread there as well. I find myself very good with people. I love working with people. I like learning from people, from everyday people. My partner once had a donut truck, and where he was selling donuts, and I went there and was helping him with the donuts. I mean, back then I think I was already chief people officer or something like that, and I was there serving donuts. So for me, and And there was silly things, that seemed trivial at the time that you wouldn't expect. But for me, I always learned something from someone. I remember giving someone a donut. I think it was about Christmas time. I said, "Happy Christmas to you and your family." And he said to me, "I'm going to tell you Happy Christmas, but I'm not going to say to you and your family because I don't know your situation. And if you have a family." I was like, you know what? I said, you're right. And that these little things that you learn along the way, I think, priceless. So if I had to pick out of everything I've just said, I'd probably say people has been the common trend.
Well, I've got a quote here from you. Above all things, I've built solid teams around me, and together we have blazed a trail through whatever journey we've taken together. I think it's such a great quote because it really describes what you've just said. And I mean, one of the big things that comes with that is because you love people so much and you work with people and you empower people that you work with. Like, of course, businesses go through ups and downs as well. It comes with hard decisions as well. It comes with having to let go of people that have been truly loyal to you for a very long time, that you've been truly loyal to, because that's what the business demands, right? Because that's what that's the way things go. And what have been some of the hardest, emotionally, the hardest decisions that you've had to make when it comes to people and perhaps that almost felt like they went against your values?
Well, the most common scenario is probably going to be making people redundant or terminating them. Of course, it's probably going to be the situation. And I think the most difficult ones are scenarios where it's not necessarily their own fault. I think in some cases, and I can recall a few where they were good at the job. They were good, but they were not able to fit into the bigger dynamics, the culture, and trying to shift the culture, especially when you have certain deliverables and certain objectives that you want to reach in a short space of time. And sometimes you do just have to, look at the bigger picture and make those tough decisions. I think for me, what makes those decisions less difficult is being transparent. I remember in the beginning of my career, my bosses would fire people with this very long-winded approach, and we all know what's coming. I mean, and I learned a lot of what not to do in my career very early on. So for me, it was, I'm very direct. If I'm having that conversation, someone's being let go, so we're going to be letting you go. That's the first thing. They already know. I've already said what's going to happen. And then I lead into the why and how we're going to make that happen. What is going to be the support? I don't let people go and just throw them out without giving them a plan. I think for me, that's very important. I'll go through their CV. I'll go through their references. I will help them secure another opportunity. Where obviously I think they're good employees. And I think the key there in those difficult scenarios is to make sure that you treat people well, in a dignified manner, because a lot of people forget that those people go to other companies, they go to your competitors, they obviously they become a part of your employer brand ultimately. So difficult decisions they were. I think for the most part, I don't think we've ever, at least, well, I keep saying we, I have ever left someone without a positive outcome to some degree.
One of the hardest things in that whole trajectory of redundancies or having to let someone go is actually the moments leading up to it, right? When you already know, you're already aware of what's going to happen. The person isn't aware yet, right? You haven't scheduled in the conversation yet. You're making the plans. You're well aware of the restructure. People are still having those conversations with you, people that maybe you even consider as friends. How did you deal with those situations? What would you advise to people perhaps listening that might be going through a situation like that?
Yeah, I think the best advice I can say is don't gossip. I think that's a big one. What I find is that people might tell someone that they're close to at work. They might tell someone that wasn't necessarily in the board meeting or the management meeting, and it leaks and it creates chaos. So I think the most important thing is keep it to yourself, be sensitive of the situation that you're in, and do it quick. One thing I can't stand is when people drag out that type of situation. I think it's extremely disrespectful, and it should just be done swiftly. I also cannot stand it when people do something like that on a Friday after the person's put in an entire week. If you knew about that throughout the week, you need to do it as quickly as possible. So for me, it's the opposite. For me, it's not normally on a Monday.
Just before Christmas, those kind of things, like don't do it, you know? Okay, so from the kind of negative side, let's turn it into some of the positives, Justin. What are some of the proudest moments you've had in your career? What are some of the things that you really feel that, you know, that is the quiet moments perhaps that you've celebrated? Maybe you celebrate them loud, I don't know, but what are the moments that you're proudest of that you've achieved?
I think for me, some of the proudest have been when I have brought on or backed someone that other people wouldn't have backed or wouldn't have brought on. I'm a big believer in the underdog. For me, seeing those people win, I think I'm probably my happiest of moments. And the same applies even to business. You know, I look at companies as well that I've bought a stake in or I've contributed to, and exactly the same thing. I mean, I'm a big fan of the underdog, and I think in part it's because I think I see myself as that underdog. And today I look back on things. I try as much as I can to give the opportunities to them, to be able to progress. I had been bitten by the underdog as well, which is probably the most disappointing of things that one can experience when you're rooting for them all the time. But I think overall that would probably be my greatest one. And I would say the other one, although it's maybe a little bit cheesy, but the other one is actually my niece, who I love. Actually, her name is, and she is an absolute star. So you know, seeing her grow and she picks up things like this. There's no tomorrow. She's going to be definitely one to watch. I'm saying that from now.
All that early.
Exactly. And I think she's also one of the proudest things as well.
I think backing the underdog is such a great trait. I mean, I've had Vladimir on the podcast, Pierre, Dimitri. I saw you on stage with all four of you on stage in Malta. And I'm like, the only one I haven't had is Justin. So I have to talk to you, because that's one of the things I love about what you say as well, where it's not so much about the pitch deck itself. It's more about the preparation, the character, the person behind the pitch deck. Why do you feel that that's more important than the actual, you know, getting the 7 words right on the slide? And you know what I mean? Like what the things that typical investors might look for. Why do you feel the character, the person is so much more important than the actual presentation?
Yeah, because I think it's a person that is going to be in their garage working their ass off to get it over the line. And if they haven't got the aptitude or the grit or the motivation to be that guy or girl, then the business is ultimately going to suffer. They might have a great presentation, but if they're not willing to put in the blood, sweat, and the tears to make it happen, then you've got a problem. I would say initially when I first took this on, there was a little bit of that imposter syndrome, which is, you know, I have mentioned it before in passing in the office, and people are like, "Oh, what? Do you have imposter syndrome? How is that possible?" But we all have something like that at some point. I think, but I quickly kind of realized that my background in with people in HR is actually probably what makes me very effective in my role. I mean, at the same time, we have had countless amounts of decks. I would say we're close to probably 300 by now. We're probably going to invest in maximum 3. We've just finalized 1. Ratio is very low, but at the end of the day, the probability of success is probably going to be much higher. I'm banking on, given that I'm backing people. So I think that for me, that is almost the secret sauce, really, and why I prefer to look at those individuals. Obviously, if your numbers are completely wonky You're saying, listen, I have an idea, it's worth 5 million, let's make it happen. It's probably not going to work out. So there's also delusion that plays a bit of a part to that. But I think if it ticks all the boxes and the person who's driving the business is going to be solid, I'd probably back that business more than anything else.
Before we started recording, we were talking a little bit about, building collapse in Malta and people being killed on the road. You speaking out on grey listing, right? It was such a great thing that you did, and having a voice there. Why do you feel that that's important for you to do? Why do you feel that that's, when you have the voice, you have the opinion, why do you feel it's important for you to speak up on those type of topics?
I think it's coming from a lot of different places. I think for me, uniquely so, is I'm Maltese, and I live in Malta, so of course I am a bit of a patriot in that sense. And two, I'm in an industry that contributes a lot to the economy, and for the most part, one could argue is almost has played a part in Malta's progress or rapid progress as well. So I think we can't always just talk about the positives. We can't always just consume. I think we also have to contribute, and to contribute doesn't necessarily mean just to give. It also means to spark conversation, to critique, and to try and evolve and push things forward. So for me, I think if you deny that we're on a grey list and we need to fix it and also prevent how we even got there in the first place, then for me that is also counterproductive. It's sort of delusion, really, right? So I think we need to talk about everything. So if we're going to neutralize our voices, if we're going to champion a cause, if we're going to be ambassadors for our industry, and if we want, the country we're based in to continue to grow and evolve and support the industry and any industry, then we have to talk about the problems too.
Yeah, I mean, you position it as an opportunity, right? And that's like, I love that as a typical you, right? Going, it's a problem, so it's an opportunity. Very different from how others would position it. Like, what was the response that you got to that? How did people, what did you hear from people after you took that position, or you I don't know, showed that position that you had?
Yeah, no, I think overall, I would say vast majority has always been very positive. I think the business community, locals, everyone likes the fact that these topics are raised, they're discussed, and they have the opportunity to even voice their own opinion. So I think overall it's always very positive. But I'd like to think that there is a small part of the change I see that come after these commentaries and videos and so on, that is somehow related to having been voiced in the first place. So I think overall it's been very positive.
One of the things I'm super interested in is one of your career decisions, Justin. I think you were in a call center where, as Malta really rapidly rise in terms of outsourcing, and so perfect timing. You then made a decision to go into, a little bit later, to go into politics, right? Like, I am so curious about that, because you're a business person. You want change. You can't sit still, right? You thrive in the challenge. That's definitely something that you'll have in politics. But politics is obviously notorious for just being slow and like it's difficult to change. Like, what made you decide to enter politics in the first place as a career change?
I mean, to be fair, I think back then I was looking back a little bit on things and saying, what is that next thing that I want to add value to? And I think politics is kind of like HR, but on steroids, really, because you've got an entire country to look after. And I think what took me into politics is, again, at the time, I think I saw nothing but issues, a lot of issues, a lot of good things happening, of course, but I think sometimes the good things happen almost by design, by flukes, I think it's just the way most people are. But a lot of the things that could be done better weren't really being addressed. And I think politically there was a lot of turmoil, a lot going on. And you hit the nail on the head there when you said that I tend to go into the problems and the challenges and see them as opportunities. And back then I saw that as exactly the same thing, which is it was an opportunity to go in and do something where I'm adding a lot more value to a lot more people with the same effort, or maybe just a little bit more, and really contribute to what makes Malta great. So that's really why I got in.
How did you feel being in politics? Did you feel that you were able to create that change? Did you feel that it was too slow? I mean, I think you moved out after 6 months or so, if I've got that right. What were some of your experiences there?
For me, it was a lot slower than I would like. I think there's nothing worse than having all the energy in the world and all the right ideas in the world and feeling like you're in quicksand. And that only going to drive you down. So I think I was also a bit naive as well when I went in, thinking that everyone had only the best interest and intent. I think for me that was a bit of a stumbling block. But I think had things gone the way that I was hoping and the way that I was trying to get things would have probably been vastly different even today. But that wasn't the case. So for me, I think I had to go through that experience. I had to learn from that experience in order to come out today very, very different. I think today there is no more naive Justin, but more just more of a wise one. And I think had that happened today, it probably would be a very different story.
Just like you said there, being in quicksand, you want to be at the forefront of change, right? And that's difficult when you're part of a bigger whole, I suppose, depending on your position, of course. But even as a group CEO, that can be difficult, right? You've got a larger organization to kind of consider, and there's direction that the company's going into. Do you struggle with that nowadays, with maybe not being able to create the change as quickly as you'd like to, versus when perhaps you were doing things completely by yourself, or you had full reins and control?
Yeah, I think today, I find it easier to affect change, of course, and I think we have some great shareholders, but I think people sometimes forget that even though you're a CEO, you had shareholders to report to, and when you don't have shareholders and you are the only UBO, you have banks to report to. You have suppliers, you have clients, you have a number of different things. So you're never really completely free to do whatever you're going to do and however you want to do it. I think you always have to consider the bigger picture ultimately. Even that includes also your employees. They have to buy into what direction they're going down, the communication that you send, your approach, and so on. And I think, in short, yes, there's a lot more. I think it's going to take a lot more change today. But at the same time, I have always told people, anyone who's ever come to me for advice, and a lot of the time I've been, they're having trouble with their manager, or this hasn't been done, or whatever. And that is that absolutely everyone, no matter what their role is, can affect change. It's just how you go about doing it. So sometimes you can't be so direct. Sometimes you do have to take a longer, more blood-soaked path in order to get there. But ultimately you'll get there. So if you have the will, if you have that grit, then you have some, I would say, tenacity. I'd say some cunning, a bit of wisdom, some advice. You'll get there as well.
And you know what's interesting? While you were talking, I was thinking about your challenges with patience, right? When you're in a middle management position, then sometimes you've got to have patience because you've got to get the rest of the organization with you. On the other hand, actually not having patience is a great skill to have, or a great character trait to have as well there, because perhaps you don't want to sit still. Perhaps you do want to push through the challenges, and you do want to disrupt what's, an organization that has been doing things the way, because they've always been done like that for so long. So where's that balance, do you think, between when to choose? I mean, this is a skill that you've been practicing for so long, so I'm going to say that you're the expert here. Where's the balance between choosing between patience and choosing for action?
I think that there has to be a number of factors, and it always depends on the situation. It's probably the right answer. So, how much time do you have, and by when do you need the result? I think is what probably is the driver to how much patience I have. And if I need the result yesterday, then I'm probably not going to have much patience. But if I have a week, if I have a day, then the approach would probably be a little bit different. I think with patience, ultimately, you have to have, and that's why I don't really like patience too much, because sometimes you have to be patient, you have to sit back and be okay.
Yeah.
I would probably be a terrible commander or general in a war, because I would probably want to go in with them to get things done. So I think patience, for me, it is almost, again, a bit of a superpower in a sense, in that, I don't have patience.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think I have the thick skin that you need, because there have been people in my past who have tried to emulate, in some way, shape, or form, how I rationalize or how I manage and how I do it. It never works. In fact, most of the time, it's always catastrophic, especially in a corporate sense. And a big part of that is because you have to have a bit of a unique blend to be able to harness impatience. You have to have a thick skin. You also have to have some charisma. So certain things that you might say from that place of impatience don't land as brick, but land a bit softly. More like a little water balloon, or something. So I think for me it is something that I use a lot. I do try and find the balance, and for me the balance is between being a brick and being that balloon, if you will.
I think it's so true. People often try to emulate other people and they see what's on the surface, not understanding that everything that's actually made that happen is the stuff that's under the water, like an iceberg, right? And you talked about 2023 being both transformative and really intense, a really rare phrase. For a CEO, I thought, and I just wanted to ask you, what's behind that phrase? Tell us a little bit more about that.
I think it was because growth and comfort don't really coexist. Us being able to deliver, making great deals, I think is great. And I think we're going to see more of the fruits of that as time goes on. But with that come long hours, tough decisions, flights, stress, or only God knows what else. I think it can be taxing to keep evolving. It can be taxing to keep pushing. It can be taxing to keep growing. I think what I learned is about the value there is in team. I think that's probably the biggest takeaway there. There was a lot that was done in that period where I relied very heavily on the stamina and the experience of my colleagues, and then my CFO, Item being one of them in particular. And that was a good thing to do, really. But I also needed that. So I think for me, it's always difficult to not go in and do something myself. It's difficult to take a step back and to believe in team. But I think that was probably one of my biggest takeaways from that period.
No longer be the bottleneck. Oh, let's love it. So if only you could duplicate yourself a million times, right? Life would be so much easier. Very last question. Your rise and your career progress is truly impressive, and like you said, it's something that you're particularly proud of, and rightly so. I'm going to ask you, if for somebody young, ambitious, that wants to make fast progress in their career, and is listening to this and was perhaps thinking, I'm not going to do exactly like Justin because that's what he just said that I shouldn't do. What would some piece of advice be that you would give them to, character traits perhaps that you see and that make people really successful, that help them stand out from the others and help them rise above everyone else? What would that be?
I probably wouldn't go down the character traits thing, because I think
Okay.
I'm going to say why, but I don't think that you can't make a leader. I think you can't make a boss. I don't think you can make a CEO. I think somewhere along the line, somewhere within them, they have that, and they have that innate ability. I think the trick is to be the best version of yourself. So I know that sounds really cheesy, and we've heard that before, but every person has their own intrinsic toolkit, really, that they need to be successful at something. Okay, for some, they can be successful at more than one thing. And the trick is to try and identify what those things are. So for me, it's really to spend time, and this is what worked for me, is to spend time with people who have more experience than you, okay, who have more knowledge than you, who have more life experience than you, and to hear them have conversations, to interact with them, to have jokes, laughs, to go to meetings with them, to have calls with them, to have a coffee with them. I think one of the best things that happened to me was I learned a lot from my elders. And I know it sounds really basic, really fundamental, but they failed on a lot of different fronts. They succeeded on a lot of different fronts, but they failed more than they succeeded. So their failures in listening to those stories and hearing about those things have really become part of who I am. So the wisdom I have, the experience I have, the approach that I have, for the most part, have been molded by decades of experience before me. Now, I don't read, and I think, as I can read, of course, but I don't read as much as I would like to when it comes to books and all that sort of stuff. I tend to listen more, and I like people's experiences more than reading. So the other bit of advice I would say is it's great to have all these self-help books and all this sort of stuff, but there is no one fix all model or scenario that's going to apply to you. Only you can fix you, and only you can build on you. I think if you have enough faith in yourself and your ideas and what it is you want to achieve, find people around you, or find people, if they're not around you, find people who can become close to you and that you can learn from, and really tap into that experience to help build what that vision looks like. Don't be afraid to say you need help. Reach out. Sometimes you will get the no. Sometimes you might not get an answer at all, but keep persevering. If you persevere, you'll get there eventually.
Love it, Justin. What a great note to end on. Be uniquely you and persevere. Justin, thank you so much for today's podcast. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for joining me on the iGaming Leader podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, head over to iGamingLeader.com for more conversations and insights. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast. I'm your host, Leo Judkins, and I hope to see you next week.